Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Zapple Tech Meetup. It's been a little while since we've seen each other. Last time we saw each other was at the Automation Summit, which was back in January. I've lost track of time, but it's nice to see everybody again. If you're here with us, drop a message in the chat. Let me know. Say hi. Let me know where you are. We have some awesome speakers today. We have Eran and Nikolaj with us. Our first speaker today is going to be Eran, and Eran has a huge background. I realized that he and I have probably not crossed paths physically, but I think we've crossed paths virtually a couple of times because he's done things like Star East and Star West, and STPCon, and it looks like TISCA and all sorts of other organizations that I've also been involved in. So I think we've crossed paths before other than on LinkedIn. But I'm really, really excited because I've seen some of his work and I'm always excited to see him speak again. Eran has been a contributor to various books on testing, including the Digital Quality Handbook, Continuous Testing for the DevOps Professional, as well as a number of other books. So I'm really, really excited to bring him on to speak with us today. So Eran, I am going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Jenna. You can see me and you can hear me, right?
Yes, I believe that you are live. There we go. Now I see you and hear you.
Hey.
Perfect.
I didn't invest in decoration, so you can see my wife's cookie cutters. My wife is a baker. So one less question from the audience. What is my background? That's my wife's cookie cutters. But anyway, again, excited to be here, and hopefully, I'll provide you some new insights about, Selenium 4, Cypress framework, and if time permits, actually, I prepared a demo, so I hope I will have time to do it as well. But yeah, I'm ready to kick it off if everyone else is ready.
I'm ready and I'm excited.
So should I start now sharing my screen? Okay. So I don't know if you can see my screen now. I did share it. I can see. Okay. So again, I'm on the slide, so I hope you can see the slides. If not, just stop me at any time. So I'm going to start the session today and focus on two frameworks which in my mind aren't competing with each other, but actually complementing each other. And the first one is going to be Selenium 4, and the other one is Cypress. I will skip my intro because Jenna, you did a great job presenting me. So if you do want to continue conversations and follow me and ask other questions, because that's a very short time that I have today, feel free to do it either via Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm trying to be available on almost all media channels. So let's start with, before I talk about Selenium and Cypress, we need to understand where both of these frameworks actually fit in the landscape. And when I talk about web testing, I always use this visual because I think we are now in a place within the industry where we are looking at web testing in three different dimensions. Okay, the first one is the WebDriver protocol-based frameworks, which is Selenium, WebDriver IO, Nightwatch, and the likes. And these are the legacy tools, if you like. I'm not saying that they are not good. I'm just saying these frameworks have been with us for over a decade, even more. The middle layer are the more modern frameworks, which are CDP oriented, Chrome Debugger protocol based, and these are the Puppeteer from Google and Playwright from Microsoft. For those of you who are not familiar with either of those, Puppeteer originated from Google. The same team that built Puppeteer then moved to Microsoft and just took the baseline for Puppeteer and built Playwright. And Playwright is a bit more mature than Puppeteer because it has more browsers and more language bindings than just Chromium and JavaScript Playwright also supports .NET and Python, etc., and has actually a bit more capabilities in my mind than Puppeteer, but this is the middle layer of frameworks. And the other, or the last layer, is Cypress, which is the JavaScript running inside the browser. And it has a lot of benefits. Okay, when you're testing inside the browser, you get the execution speed, you get debugging capabilities, which are very rich, and some would say less flakiness. I would argue about the flakiness here, because flakiness, in my mind, is attributed also to how you design your test automation, and I will touch on that during this session as well. But just to set the ground, these are the three main types or models or architectures, as you wish, in the cross-browser testing landscape as of today. If you look at some trends, you would see that Cypress is kind of rocking the market with the most number of downloads compared to Playwright, Selenium, and Puppeteer. Playwright is catching up. Playwright, we need to be fair, is the newest among all the different frameworks. Cypress is for a few years in the market, but Cypress obviously gets much more downloads than the others. Selenium, again, also it's a bit unfair to look at the numbers because Selenium also contributes to WebDriver IO is built on top of Selenium, and there are other frameworks that are leveraging Selenium. So if you aggregate all of the Selenium based frameworks, it might be a bit higher. Actually, it's going to be higher than what you see right now on the screen. But definitely, I typically ask, okay, so what about Test Cafe? What about Robot framework? You can see also some placeholder from this screenshot, right? Casper.js. There are many frameworks, but if you look at the numbers and you look at the adoption in the marketplace, these are the 3-4 frameworks which we see mostly adopted. Me within Perfecto, within Perforce. These are the frameworks that my customers are using the most. It's not that they don't know about Test Cafe or Robot or other frameworks. They adopt the Selenium, Cypress, and sometimes also starting to look at Playwright when you're dealing with web testing. Let's look at Cypress. I'm going to start with Cypress and then move to Selenium 4. And then I really hope I will have time to do a short demo. I will try to speak fast, but not too fast so you understand. But also I will leave some time so you can see, at least one of these technologies in reality live. So as I mentioned earlier, Cypress runs in the browser. It's just JavaScript. It's not all of the browsers. It's just Chrome, Edge, and Firefox on Windows and Mac. It doesn't support WebKit Safari as of today. It's in the roadmap. But without the browsers and the other languages, this is a very powerful framework based on JavaScript. It's asynchronous framework, which we know what it means. You need to deal with a lot of things. But JavaScript is the leading language in the web development landscape, and this is why Cypress is so well adopted by front-end web application developers. I can tell you within Perfecto that my team, the engineering team, I'm talking about the R&D, the ones that are building Perfecto cloud testing solution, they are testing our product with Cypress, okay? And I think that's a proof, right? If the developers that are actually building tools that support Cypress are actually testing the tool with their own dog food, if you like, it means that Cypress is actually a very strong and appealing framework for front-end developers. But you can see here that Cypress, from a framework perspective, it's built in two ways. This is what you see right now on the screen. That's the GUI mode. You can run from CLI as well. But in the GUI mode, what you can get is a nice way to create your test cases. I will soon talk also about the Cypress Studio, which allows you to record testing, test automation scripts. But you see you have the ability to look on the left hand and step by step and understand what's going on. It's a very synchronized way of clicking on the left panel of your Cypress GUI, and on the right hand you are going to see what's actually happening on the browser, on the web application itself, and you can get DOM snapshots, you can interact with the elements, you can learn the element locators of your web application. So it's a very powerful environment, even a mini IDE, if you like, for your web testing capabilities. Cypress is not just about the basic hello world. It's actually a very, very sophisticated and rich test automation framework for web applications. One of the key use cases I'm going to talk about more in the next few slides. One of the things that you can do with Cypress is use the Stub Navigator's APIs and kind of learn from your web application a lot of insights. In this case, I borrowed this example from my friend Gleb. Gleb Bahamutov, sorry, used to be a VP engineering for Cypress. Is no longer with Cypress, but he's still supporting the community. And that's a nice demo that he created, reading from a battery status APIs through the Stub Navigator capabilities. So that's one way of using Cypress to obtain data and read from a web application running in real time. Another powerful capability of Cypress, and we'll also touch a bit about that with Selenium, but with Cypress, you can actually also do some retries to avoid flakiness. We talked about flakiness in the first slide, right? When we define the different frameworks and architectures, but when you can define in a Cypress JSON format the number of retries before you fail a test, before you classify it as a flaky one, that's a huge and very easy to create capability within your test automation framework. So by default, you can set different configurations, even for a specific test scenario or for the entire suite. Cypress not just provides you the ability to put this retry mechanism, it can actually allows you to classify test cases or ignore them in case of a specific condition. So you can actually play with ignore and retry and other conditions in a very easy way as part of the configuration files, and this is very powerful. For example, if you're using feature flags or if you want to test only scenarios that are starting with a specific character or with a specific word on a specific platform, you can do it very easily through the Cypress JSON configuration file. You can also do some nice other things, which in my mind are quite complicated to do in other frameworks, especially with Selenium, and this is the switching of test environments. There are tools, I come from Perfecto, we are a cloud environment, and we can test locally, you can test in the cloud. You can use Perfecto with our new acquisition called Blazemeter to do a lot of API testing and mocking. But in this regards, with Cypress, what you can do is you can specify a configuration file. You can see it here that defines different base URLs based on local, staging, testing, pre-production, production, okay? And you can run from your CLI through configuration of the module exports. So if you run Cypress with an environment configuration, which is either prod or staging or whatever, you're going to use different base URLs. Think about CI/CD, right? Think about continuous integration. You can put this command in your CI or in different schedulers or triggers that will automatically choose the right test environment for you based on a specific suite, based on a specific commit that you are doing to your code, etc. So this is a nice way of using Cypress to really switch environment in real time as part of your schedule test cases. So I think I actually love this capability of Cypress. And there is actually a very nice blog that I came across from Philip Herrick. Is a Cypress ambassador on his own, and you can actually read and get some code samples on his blog on really how to set up your own different test environment switcher, like you see right now on the screen. Another capability of Cypress, which I like, is the Cypress clock and Cypress intercept. You can actually use these network control capabilities to really learn and analyze what's happening in your web application in real time by using the tick, right? Every 30 seconds, you can validate what's happening on the screen. So if you have a very dynamic web application, you can use Cypress wait, tick, and assert, or like you see here, you can make sure that for each foot here, the text file or whatever output will contain favorite fruits list, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. So this is a very advanced and quite easy to script in JavaScript capability to, again, deal with a very dynamic, constantly changing web application form or forms by using this interception or clock in this regards. The interception actually will allow you to do some mocking as well. So you can use as I mentioned earlier, the stub APIs and others to really mock your pre-production environment or your unready environment in that regards, and really intercept network calls to a different origin or different endpoint, if you like, and continue testing earlier in the cycle. Cypress comes with a lot of plugins. I will soon touch on my favorite plugins, but Cypress also complements its functional testing with visual testing. And I know when you're dealing with responsive web applications, the UI UX is very critical. And what I've learned with Cypress, that you can use either the commercial tool from Apply Tools, or you can use the plugin to Hapo, and Hapo.io, that's the visual tool that Cypress plays nicely with, allows you to really do a snapshot of your web application and validate, different user outputs across different platforms as well, viewports, if you like, in a nice way. So it's a bit more sophisticated than just, using cypress.cy.screenshot, which just takes screenshots. These tools actually do this analysis and comparison and gets you the additional layer of user experience with visual testing. So if you're interested in learning more, you can go to this Hapo Cypress GitHub repository and see how to use it. You can install, just to get started, you can install and generate your token and security key, and just start using Hapo with Cypress as is. Obviously, if you exceed the basic usage, as far as I understand, Hapo also has obviously a commercial paid version. By the way, I didn't mention it, Cypress also, while it's an open source, and that's the powerful piece of Cypress, you also have a paid version of Cypress, which is the dashboard with the parallel testing and with the flakiness and other reporting advanced capabilities. Cypress, not like the CDP frameworks, which are Puppeteer and Playwright, which are built on CDP, Cypress can work with the browser dev tools through the CDP. So if you want to leverage some of the Chrome debugging protocol and the dev tools, Lighthouse, etc., you can do it easily through the plugins. You just need to install, you need to configure the Cypress JSON and the index.js to put the required package of Lighthouse, etc., and you can then interact with the CDP and get whatever you like back to your Cypress terminal. Almost lastly, for Cypress plays nicely with the majority of the CI/CD tools. These are the logos of the CI tools that are very well documented on the Cypress website. This is just a snapshot of the GitHub actions that you would do with Cypress, but you can read about CI/CD in this link that I provide here. But just to summarize, Cypress plays nicely with developers, and it plays nicely with all of the CI/CD tools, most of them in the industry. So once you're solidifying your test scenarios, you can easily integrate them into Circle CI, GitLab, GitHub Actions, Bitbucket, and the likes. Cypress can also do API testing. I don't know if many of you have tried it. I actually tried it. You see my name here, so that's my name. I have done some API testing with Cypress. It's not rest assured. It's not, SOAP UI. It's not the best or the most, complex API testing tools. In other sessions that I gave, I was asked about contract testing as well. Cypress is good to some extent with API testing. It can cover all, the post, get, all the other API methods that you need for your website, but it's not as sophisticated, especially from the creation standpoint, like other dedicated API testing tools. But still, think about it. You can do accessibility and API and visual and functional, and soon I'll touch a bit on single user performance testing in a single framework, and this is quite powerful. So to sum up until a certain level of complexity, you can use just Cypress for multiple test automation types, as I mentioned, functional and non-functional. Cypress plays nicely, by the way, this is common to almost all the frameworks that I touched recently. Cypress, Selenium, Playwright, and Puppeteer, they all play nice with Istanbul based on Babel. So you can instrument your source code of your web application and run Cypress with code coverage. You'll get a nice output report. You can see it here, which gets reported to your Cypress local directory, and you can analyze all the different coverage items. If you want to get started, it's very easy. You install this package of code coverage with Cypress. You add to the index.js this import line, and to the index.js you add also the export, the required capability of Cypress code coverage. And then after you instrument your code, you will run it with with the code coverage enabled plugin, and you will get also the output of your code coverage. I think it's a nice and powerful capability. I mentioned accessibility. Accessibility with Cypress is mostly covered through the AXC by DQ tool. So you again install the package, the plugin from the NPM store, and you are adding the check accessibility, Cypress.check accessibility commands into your scripts based on a specific page, web application that you have, multiple pages or just components. Cypress also supports component testing, and then you get also the accessibility reports back to your dashboard. This is, by the way, how it will look like when you're looking at a spec.js test. You will see here the assertion. You will get the results in a nice visual way. When you click on them, you get you see the DQ University. You get a link that explains you the violation of your accessibility, and you can mitigate it and move forward. Accessibility is top of mind for everyone. So if you are doing Cypress today, install the AXC plugin and validate, obviously, across these different platforms that you support. Something new, which is still in an experimental stage right now, that's the component testing. It's an innovative approach in my mind, and this is what Cypress provides to the industry, allowing you to really close a bit of the gaps between unit and integration test. Everyone knows the test pyramid. What Cypress component testing allows you to do is kind of close the gap between two layers of your application by building or testing components of your application, parts of your application, if you like, in an end-to-end manner or in a functional manner. And it's done through, as you can see here, you need to add or mount the specific area of your website into JavaScript, into your test code, test it as a standalone, if you like. You can do it with Vue.js or React application. To do or to utilize it after enabling component testing, you will simply run Cypress Open with the OpenCT, that's the component testing enabler, and then you will get the ability to run and validate a specific subset of your application from a functional standpoint. Another thing which is experimental, I will try to demonstrate it soon in my demo, that's the Cypress Studio. Think about it. It's a record and playback done in the GUI mode. It's built into the framework. You don't need to install anything. You just need to enable it within your Cypress file, configuration file, and that's it. I will talk a bit about it when I'm demonstrating the GUI part. Performance testing can be done either built in by using the performance mark, okay, which comes with Cypress, or by using the Lighthouse. Okay, as I mentioned, Cypress can play nice with the CDP and also integrate with Lighthouse. When you're using Lighthouse, you actually get all these different performance KPIs back into your console, your terminal, or your test results, if you like. And these are some of the supported KPIs that you get also from the F12 in your Chrome browser, but you can get them in an automated fashion by embedding them into your Cypress scripts. Lastly, before I move to Selenium, I just wanted to say a word because I think I was asked in a different conference about page object model. Selenium is very strong with page object model. Cypress can also do page object model. It can do it either as I call, or as Cypress advises, the hard way, just writing a class and using the import to utilize methods and objects from this page object model class, or on the other way, or the better way, to use commands. You can create commands that kind of encapsulate methods like username, password, login, and other capabilities within your web application. Or the best way or the fastest way is using app action, and these are the custom commands, and you can customize commands which again encapsulates things that you want to do on your website, but without creating tons of files and maintaining them with custom commands. And there is a nice link here. It's a bit old, but it's still relevant. You can see here that with a React application, you can actually do with custom commands a lot of things. You can just with one function go to a specific website, which includes a lot of to-do lists, and just add few to-do lists in one single call, which is much faster than 3 different classes with other spec JSs that you need to maintain. So if you're interested in page object model with Cypress, I recommend to go to this link and look at the app actions and how you can create them. I talked about almost about all the different plugins within Cypress. You can see most of them here: component testing, visual testing, code coverage, BDD, accessibility, and much more. Again, it's very dynamic. If you're interested in learning more about plugins, cypress.io has all the plugins listed. Let's move in the time that I have to Selenium. Selenium, again, isn't new. That's why I didn't allocate tons of time in my session. But with Selenium 4, which is fully W3C compliant as of last September, that was when it was released, supports many things. It can integrate with CDP, again, Chrome debugging protocol, which allows you to do a lot of things, not just the Lighthouse. You can actually block specific types of content being loaded on your website, like images and stuff like that. You have a new look and feel. You have a new icon even for the Selenium thing. Selenium IDE was redeveloped and now runs on Firefox browser as well as on the Chrome that was the only browser that supported Selenium IDE. So now you have 2 browsers and a new modern way of using Selenium IDE. These are just few changes that you would do with your code if you are moving from Selenium 3 or below to Selenium 4. You will need to make it very W3C compliant, and these are a few of the changes that you will need to do. For example, you'll need the find element by ID will be now find element in brackets by .id. So these are just few changes, but there is a full guide on how to convert your existing script to Selenium 4. But again, it's not a slam dunk. You need to comply with W3C and the right formats. A new grid was created. I played with it. It's very intuitive. It's very easy to use. You just need to download, of course, the right Selenium grid jar file and configure it properly, but it allows you to very easily manage your multiple parallel executions. As I'm representing also Perfecto, Perfecto provides this exact Selenium grid, but in our cloud, so you don't need to set up anything local. You can run all of your Selenium, by the way, also Cypress tests in parallel in the cloud across regions and browsers without this local headache. So this is just kind of my own commercial, if you like. Selenium, I think that's one of the biggest features in my mind that people were asking for. Now supports relative locators, which means if you have a very complex, maybe sometimes duplicate elements on your web application, with Selenium 4, you can specify, you can see here, to left of this element or to the right or below, etc. And this allows you to really focus your click or your action on an element locator based on the relative locators methods that are supported from Selenium 4 onwards. So you can see here to left of, below, etc., etc. Something that Cypress does not support and Selenium does support is, for example, a very simple way to work with multiple tabs and windows, which was enhanced and now works nice with Selenium 4. You can see here a nice code snippet. You can go to the click this link once you get the slides and learn even more, or download the code snippet. But you can see here that you can use the get window handle to really navigate and operate on specific tabs within your web application or even different windows. And this is something that, for example, like iframes and other sophisticated web applications, it's a bit harder to do with Cypress. Some of them can be done, but it requires a lot of effort. With Selenium, it's a bit easier. A final summary between these 2 frameworks. Again, I'm not competing one versus the other. I'm just saying you can benefit from both few of them. A few of the features that I mentioned earlier with Cypress aren't available in Selenium, and vice versa. When you combine these two frameworks together, you actually get a very strong testing strategy across your web applications. So I actually recommend combining both. But this is just a lot of the points that I mentioned, and maybe a summary of the things that you need to take under consideration when you're looking into these two frameworks. But again, both are very mature, very robust, rich with features. But again, they have some differences, and these are just a few on top of what I mentioned earlier in this presentation. Before we move to Q&A, and I think I did it exactly on time, let me try and show you a demo. For that, I would like, I don't know, Jenna, if you can still hear me, just let me know if you can see my VS Code. Can you see my Visual Studio Code?
You're good. I can see it. Sorry.
Awesome.
It was bringing me in. Yeah, you're good. We can see it.
Okay, so what you see right now here, that's my Visual Studio Code with an installed Cypress framework. And you can see here, it comes with a lot of examples. Some of them I created myself. Some of them came with Cypress. And you can see here, there are a bunch of capabilities and scenarios. This spec.js, for example, that's the example that I created for my API testing. So here I have...
Sorry, Eran. So you've got plenty of time. You can go a little deeper in the demo if you want, or you can talk about some additional things if you'd like to.
Okay. How much time do I have more?
You've got like 50 minutes. You're totally fine. Go as deep as you want.
15, right?
50.
50. Oh,
yeah.
Excellent. Oh, I thought... Oh, so what did I run? Okay, awesome. That's good. So yeah, I will actually focus now more on the demo. And now that I know that I have time, it's even greater. So cool. What you can see then on my screen, that's a local installation of Cypress. I think it's prior to the latest version. Cypress is releasing almost every 2 or 3 weeks a new version, minor one. So that's almost the latest version. But you can see here, this is an example of an API test. Basically, I just go to this freeware website for API testing. It was built for API testing. I have my own personal token, and I'm just adding some to-do lists to this website. So that's an example of an API test that you can do with Cypress. What I'm also, I think it's a very cool thing to do with Cypress is, especially because Cypress is not a mobile-friendly solution like Selenium. Selenium has its kind of native brother called Appium. So Appium is the web driver for mobile native application and hybrid application testing. With Cypress, Cypress is very focused on web, but what can we do for web is web and mobile, which means you want to test web applications across both, the desktop web application, platforms, and mobile viewports at least, right? With the Cypress viewport and other configuration, you can actually specify, you can see here a bunch of different viewports like MacBook and iPad and iPhone and whatever, and portrait versus landscape, and you can play with different layouts of your, to test a specific website, few windows or whatever. So that's a nice add-on to the Cypress APIs or framework that you can use. You can also, as I mentioned, use the network control APIs and do this network stubbing and mocking. I mentioned earlier the switching of environments. It's very easy to do. When you install Cypress, you have a few things that you want to know. First, one of the key files is obviously the cypress.json. As you will see, you get a project ID. The project ID is what you need, and you will also get it in the dashboard when you go to the Cypress dashboard web application, which you get to log into. But what I'm actually doing with this Cypress.json in this case is I'm setting true to the experimental studio, because I'm going to also show you this record and playback tool that Cypress provides you, like the Selenium ID provides, by the way. Another interesting thing that you can do with Cypress, let me see, is specify locations. Okay, with Cypress, you can actually specify longitude and latitude of your web application, and validate that maybe on a specific web application, when you are navigating to a different geography, you're going to get a pop-up, you're going to get a different output as a user. And since Cypress is based also on Mocha, you also have the ability to use all the assertions capabilities which comes with Mocha, Mocha.js, and much more. Basically, to run Cypress, what you will need to do, again, you can run it with just a specific command line interface and run either all of the spec.js that you have built, or you want to use the GUI method. And here I'm going to use the GUI runner, if you like. Let me just give it a second to load. So now what you see right now on my screen, that's the Cypress GUI. The Cypress GUI allows you to add a new spec file. It shows me which browsers I have locally, Edge 98 and Firefox 97 and Chrome 98. I have 3 browsers. Actually, I have also Electron 94, which comes built in with Cypress as well. And to run a spec, you just need to click on it. Okay, let's, for example, click on action spec.js. You will see that local Chrome browser, because I selected the Chrome local browser on my machine, is being launched, and all these test scenarios are running, and you can see the fast execution here, right? I mentioned earlier that Cypress runs in the browsers, which means you're getting fast feedback. You get all these execution done in seconds. Once the execution is completed, and you can see here all the tests passed, this is a nice way of interacting with the DOM. And you can see, as I mentioned, a synchronized view. You can see here in this test body, when I'm clicking on the left panel, you see it on the right hand. And when I click on the elements, everything is being highlighted. Okay, and you can see here, I can open the selector background, and I can actually mouse over each and every item in my web application. So think about the front-end developer, but also the SDET, the test automation engineer. He can really interact with the web application under test, get and learn all the elements before he's actually recording or creating his test scripts, but definitely view the execution after it was completed, okay, in a synchronized way. So think about this step, for example, might have failed. I can just click on that and see what happened. It might be a bug. It might be that I didn't use the right element locator. It might, the element locator might have changed as well. So this is a nice side-by-side way of using Cypress test cases on the left, or test steps on the left, with the actual web application under test on the right. So this is something that I think it's quite cool. And if I, let's say, want to make it even more sophisticated, right? This test ended in this point. When I click on that, let me see if I have it enabled. Yes, let's see. A second. I should be able to close that. No, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm sorry. See if I still have it open. Yeah, I wanted to click on that. Okay, when you see this step, again, this is not creating a new test. This is just editing an existing test spec. I can actually use this add command to test. When I click on that, okay, look at what happens. You see this studio beta is becoming enabled, and I can now exactly synchronize to the left panel that I've showed you, add a new step. Here I can add live Zapper Tech event or whatever, okay? And click enter, and you will see that this step, you see it here, was added to my script. This is the record and playback. So I've added in real time in my running script a new command or a new test to my JavaScript. So if I click on save commands here, okay, I will close this IDE, okay, this window. I will close the Cypress Studio. Now, when I go, I should have remembered which file I added. I think it was the action spec, right? So let's see when I scroll down, because I added something to the Cypress Studio. Let me search for, yeah. Okay, you can see that generated with Cypress Studio. Okay, I've added 2 new commands to my JavaScript file through the Cypress Studio without really writing any line of JavaScript. Okay, and you see here live Zapple-Tech event, and I click on enter. So now when I'm going to run this specific test again, obviously it will use this Cypress Studio additional lines of code. And by the way, these lines could be for debugging purposes, can be just easy test creation, or I can record an end-to-end scenario from scratch using this Cypress Studio capability. The nice thing about Cypress Studio is it's not the best and most sophisticated solution. It's still in beta, by the way, but it's either an entry-level tool for you to get started with JavaScript test creation and with Cypress. From that point, once it's in your IDE, you can maximize and add assertions and add much more sophisticated steps to your automation. But again, that's a nice add-on, a nice complementary capability that comes for free with Cypress. Another thing that is nice and comes with Cypress is the ability to run. You see here, I have 1, 2, 3, I have like 10 different specs, and each spec has multiple test cases. What I can actually do here, I can run them easily in parallel in the cloud. Okay, what I'm talking here is I can actually create a zip file of everything that you see here under integration. Integration usually holds all of the test specification in JavaScript. You can actually create different folders and different specs under this hierarchy. When you install through the npm store npm perfecto cypress cypress SDK, npm cypress perfecto cypress SDK, then you get the ability to zip everything that you have just created and upload it to the cloud. The beauty of that, or the benefit of that, is the parallel testing. Doing parallel testing with Cypress isn't that straightforward, and it's usually going to use whatever you have from a browser perspective, what you have locally. If you've seen in the GUI mode, I had Chrome 98, I had Firefox, and I have Edge 97, I think. I have 3 browsers. So I can execute on either one of these 3 browsers, or on all of these 3 in parallel. I just need to enable the record and parallel testing with Cypress, but it's feasible. But it's not perfect. When you're using this SDK, okay, what you can do, you can put, like you do with Selenium, desired capabilities. You can configure in this JSON config file. That's the only thing you need to do, okay? You can add as many browsers, as many instances of these browsers, like here, Windows 10 with Chrome latest, Windows 10 with Edge latest, Mac OS Big Sur with Chrome 98, Windows 10 with Firefox latest. I can go on and on, okay? Once I'm adding that and running the Cypress command, that's the only configuration you need to do, by the way. Okay, obviously you need to have credentials to the cloud, okay, with a security token, but that's all. That's everything that you need to do. It doesn't change any of your Cypress scripts, and by that you get the zip file, it's uploaded to your private cloud, and you run it in parallel at scale. The way it's going to look is as follows. I'm going to open my demo cloud in the browser. And once I'm in the demo cloud, if you go to the live stream of the Perfecto thing, you see I'm running Eran Cypress test. You see it's just started, a few moments ago. Okay. Once it's the video is live, you can see it here. Okay. Once the execution is ready to start, okay, everything what you see right now is clean VMs. Okay. We are setting up new virtual machines in the cloud with Edge 98, with Chrome, Mac OS, etc. So we are building up new clean virtual machines with browsers. We are installing on these browsers Cypress. Okay, everything is fresh. That's why it's taking about 1 to 2 minutes to set up each and every browser. But think about it, you can get 20 or 100 browsers if you like. And then once it's done, it uploads to that VM the zip file and runs the Cypress run command. You can monitor while it's doing that the execution in the terminal. I'm using Visual Studio Code. You can do it from IntelliJ or any other IDE. But basically, once the setup is done in the cloud, you can start seeing the execution running as fast as it was running locally. But again, it's done for you as a service in a cloud-based environment. So let me just check in 1 second. Yes, once all these checkboxes are ready, you can see here that it checks all the dependencies, the Node.js dependencies, the versions, the browsers, and also uploads the zip file. Everything becomes green here, and then you start seeing the execution, live in the cloud. While it's still setting it up, for those of you who are not familiar with this UI of Perfecto, again, this is a cloud-based environment for running both web and mobile application testing, native application testing with Appium or other frameworks, as well as Selenium for web. And basically, you get all of these platforms as a service. You get real mobile devices, virtual mobile devices, desktop browsers that you can automate on or do actually manual testing on them, again, in the cloud, in parallel, in different geographies. Okay, the clouds are spread into 6 continents, okay, all over the world. We have multiple data centers, and with that, you can actually run and scale your test automation with CI, without CI, again, and everything that gets executed in real time gets to the report library. So once the execution will be completed, you'll see here that everything gets stored in your report library and actually even classified. I will talk a bit about it in just a few moments, but every execution that you're doing gets classified in the report automatically through machine learning. So we talked a bit about flakiness. So if you have an error in your test script, and it's classified as failure because, I don't know, an element wasn't found, a pop-up happened, or whatever, or a configuration was not set up correctly, okay, it will be automatically classified so you can fix it and maybe exclude it from your environment. But while I was talking, you see that the execution already started. I can actually maximize the window so you will see it better. But that's actually all of the executions happening on 4 or 5 different browsers. The entire zip file that I've just uploaded to the cloud, okay, that's the action spec that I've shown you, okay. I think it will actually add the Zappeltech. You saw the live Zappeltech. So everything that I uploaded to the cloud is now executed for me in parallel at scale across Chrome and Firefox and Edge and Chrome on Mac OS as well. All of the scripts. We don't need to wait for everything because I think I have like 20 JavaScript specification files, but you get the point, right? It's done. It's being executed for you at scale in the cloud. Okay. Maybe let's just look at one report. I will just refresh my library. Okay, you can see here that's Cypress. Sorry. Okay, I think that's 11:26. Okay, so that's now the report is up to date. Okay, let's see if I have. You can see here that's a Cypress report that was uploaded to the cloud, and you see here that maybe I'll just click on the video and that's it. We'll show you the video, the recording. So that's basically the kitchen sink. It's a very short step or test, but it was also recorded as video. So it's not just running for you in the cloud in parallel. You also get the recording that you can download, plus the Cypress log. So if I want to download the Cypress logs for this specific execution, I can actually download the log file and open and review it. Okay. So that was a bit of a short demo of Cypress. In the time that I have, I also want to show you the exact same thing, but with Selenium. Okay. The nice thing about Selenium, obviously, is that Selenium comes with a grid, but it has the price of this client-server communication. So in this demo that I'm showing you, I simply use a native Selenium in Java. I'm using Java here. You have seen JavaScript with Cypress in the previous demo. Here I'm using Java, and here I'm testing at massive scale. Okay, you will soon see that, and you will understand. I'm going to test Selenium, and this is not something that I can do easily with Cypress. With Selenium, I'm using a real Samsung Galaxy S9, a real Galaxy Note 10, iPhone 7, iPhone 11, Chrome 89, Chrome 92. Look at all of these configurations. So I specified all of these configurations in my test. And here I'm actually going to the website of the Boston Globe. you see here, I'm opening a driver connection, and I'm navigating to the Boston Globe website to simply provide or subscribe to their newsletter or paper, whatever, in that sense. So basically, it's a Maven project in Java, going and testing the Boston Globe subscription capabilities, and I'm using TestNG as my data provider. And you see here, all of these configurations are running against this test on delivery sign up class in Java. So it's very straightforward. When I click on running this project, this Maven project, I'm going to open, I don't know, about 20 or something different driver connections to both web and mobile platforms to run and test my responsive web. Boston Globe is a responsive web application, and you see it here when I go to the live stream. Okay, I'm just going to use my name, which is Eran K, and you're going to see in few seconds, okay, mobile, desktop web, tablets, all populating at the same time, running this Selenium script in Java in parallel. It's a very fast script, so I will try and catch something before it closes. Let me just see if I can catch maybe this mobile. Okay, you can see here, it closed. I'll try to catch this one. But basically, you see I'm putting my zip code here. I live in Boston, so I'm putting the zip code of my Boston area, which is 01801, and I'm putting my different credentials into this browser page and checking that everything works fine. So I don't know, I counted almost 20 different configurations, Chrome latest and beta and latest -2 and mobile and tablets for my responsive web. And this is a bit more simple to do than what you could have achieved, in my mind, with Cypress. Again, I'm not competing. I'm just saying that you can actually do few things with these two different frameworks. But when you're talking about scale and when you're talking about responsive web testing across both web, mobile, multiple platforms, including Safari WebKit, Selenium has some nice advantages. When I'm going to refresh, my reports, okay, I'll just refresh this entire reporting. You will see that I'll just zoom on one report that is, I think, ready, and this is the execution on Chrome Beta 99 on Windows 7. I know Windows 7 is old, but I'm actually dealing with customers that are still supporting this platform for legacy purposes and whatever. So you can see here, everything that I'm testing here gets recorded, both screenshots, logs, and videos. And you can see here all the zip codes, everything that I've done, finding the elements locator, taking a screenshot, everything is being done for me, so I can go back, and if I have any failure, I can debug it. If I ran it from CI, from Jenkins, I would have actually seen it here in my CI dashboard. I didn't, but I could have done it from Jenkins or Bamboo or Circle CI, and I could have seen it here as well. So with that, let me stop sharing my screen, and let's see if I have any challenging questions. I've spoken a lot. I've spoken about Cypress, its architecture. I spoke a bit about Selenium and Selenium 4 specifically regarding its latest capabilities, like the relative locators, CDP, W3C compliance, and so on and so forth. I gave you some demos of Cypress running JavaScript specs within the GUI mode, and also in the cloud, and also the Cypress Studio. And then I've shown you Selenium running tests on a responsive web application on multiple platforms that was in Java. So now, in the time that I have left, I don't know how much time I still have left, but in the time that I have left, I'm happy to take any questions, any challenges that you have for me. So now it's the time.
Hey,
Jenna.
all right. That was a fantastic talk. Thank you so much.
Sure.
While we wait for questions to come into the chat, I think I have a few questions for you. So you mentioned integration with DQ, and I For anybody who doesn't know, I'm a huge fan of DQ. What are your thoughts around kind of when we think about accessibility and how much we can cover with automation? What are your thoughts around enhancing what we're doing with automation? How else should we be addressing that?
So I think that's a great question, and accessibility. If we have been talking like 2 years or even 1 year from now, it wasn't such a huge deal. It was still important, and I am a huge fan. I totally understand that every application, not just web, mobile, desktop, anything needs to be accessible for any impaired users with whatever lack of capabilities that they have. With regards to making that a reality for these guys, to your point, we need to enable testers and developers to do better testing in an automated fashion, because when it's done manually, it's not that no one cares. No one has the time to do it. So we need to enrich the automation. I've been working over the past few months, I would say, with a different vendor. DQ are, the leaders, and they're doing tons of work for accessibility. We are partners. Perfecto is a proud partner of DQ for web and mobile accessibility, and they're doing great. But when you're talking about mobile accessibility and you need to do like screen readers and all these different complex use cases, I wouldn't say it falls short, but it's not as sophisticated, if you like, especially from an automated testing perspective. And this is where I actually want to throw a name to the audience, and this is eVinced, EVINCED. I don't know if you are all familiar with this vendor. It's a new one, by the way. They are very focused on mobile accessibility testing, automation. It's built on top of Appium, but it actually does a nice snapshot of your application and provides you a nice way of automating accessibility testing across almost any mobile device, locally, in a cloud environment or whatever. And I think that plus DQ. I love your cat. I have 2 cats myself, but mine are sleeping all day. Mine are always sleeping. I don't know. They're very tired. So yeah, I think that there is still room to grow in the accessibility space to make it kind of an equal citizen within the testing space. So people will shift left. I hate to say shift left so many times, but you do want to make sure that you are testing accessibility like you do any functional testing on your application, and you need to do it as code changes, because you might have broken something that will cause accessibility failures. So DQ, eVinced, and I have actually seen even Apple and Google. We cannot say something without mentioning these 2 guys, right? So Apple and Google are providing for free native accessibility scanners. In my platform, in Perfecto, we actually embrace these native scanners for teams that don't want to do too much accessibility testing because they don't have a very complex application. They can settle with just these built-in native scanners. So we just added it as an Appium capability in Perfecto, and it just runs this XUI scanners from iOS, from Apple, and the Google Android scanner on the Android application, and you get a nice report. So again, room for growth, but we're not yet there.
Yeah, I agree on that. And I think because we're not yet there, that's where unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, because I really do embrace the manual. We do still have to do some look and feel, right? We still have to get in there, and turn on JAWS or try NVDA, or if you're on a Mac, you can turn on what is it, TalkBack? TalkBack.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a space I spent some time in, and it's so hard because as able people, we sometimes miss that while it technically meets the requirements of WCAG, it doesn't meet the heart of it. And so it passes, but it's still not usable. And that's where we have to, in my opinion, bridge the gap. Because automation can tell us some of that, but can't tell us all of that. Apparently, Maka has decided that she is going to be a guest on the show, so we're gonna we're going to move her because
If
now
she
she's
if
going to
she
step on
has
the
any if she has any questions, I'm happy to address even cat questions. Everything goes. By the way, Jenna, I've seen many questions around. I only focused on Cypress and Selenium in this session. I did mention a bit, Playwright, and I often get asked. So, is Playwright going to take everything that we've just built with Selenium and Cypress? Is it going to disrupt everything that we know? Because I'm talking with customers of my own, and they've built a nice solid framework with Selenium, and it works for them. And they come to me and say, "Oh, we heard about Flutter. Oh, we heard about Playwright. Should I switch to a new framework just because it's out there?" So my immediate question, and I'm happy to also hear your thoughts about it, because I keep getting asked, and I'm saying, if it ain't broken, don't fix it, right? If you have a good Selenium framework which does everything that you need from a use case perspective and coverage perspective, don't break it just because there is a new cool framework out there. Yes, if you have flakiness, if you don't have the ability to support all of the advanced use cases, and you find that Playwright can cover such use cases, then yes, by all means, go and explore, do a POC, a proof of concept, and adopt. And you don't need to throw, by the way, anything. You can just merge or like use more than one framework to cover more ground. But you need to have this trigger in my mind within your life cycle, your project life cycle, that will enable you to do this switch, because it's costly. It's not just a one and done. You need to be careful about that.
I agree, and I have mixed feelings because I'm a big fan of anyone coming into our space and trying something new. I always want to see that investment in our space. Um, I'm still not 100% sold on Playwright. However, I don't know if you know Andy Knight. He
Yes.
he's been yeah. So he's a big advocate of it, and has been talking about it, and so I'm getting a little more sold. Um, I'm for anything that will increase the robustness of what we have available to us. Um, Selenium is the standard, right? We've been using it for 20 years. We're going on 20. But there's always been the Selenium flakiness. So anything that's going to challenge us to make things more hardy will make me happy.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you, and I think that we are in a stage right now of this industry of the evolution of test automation frameworks, that, as I demonstrated in my live demo of Cypress, right? Cypress now comes with its own recorder. Selenium now comes with a recorder. Playwright, by the way, and I know I've seen a session from Andrew Knight showing Playwright. Playwright has its own code generation inspector, so you can actually even automate and record and playback with Playwright as well. So it's becoming kind of an equal citizen, or table stakes, to have code and scriptless within the same open source framework now, right? With Appium, we are hearing Test.ai contributing a piece of AI for code generation to the Appium community as well. So what we know right now and what we are going to see in 6 months might be different. So again, I would advise everyone to be on the lookout for advanced capabilities which can make us better testers. That's what we want to do, right? We want to do better testing, not because we want to cheer to ourselves. We want to find more bugs. We want to make sure that our quality just continue to grow, or if it's good enough, remains the same. And you can only do it with advanced technologies. We mentioned earlier the accessibility, but it's also across the board.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So let's see. Are there any other challenging questions that we can pick? Anything else that you wanted me to cover? I'm happy to do so.
So I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. Somebody said something. I don't know if this is a tool or if this is just a random comment, but it says Moti, MOTI. Is there a tool I'm not aware of?
No, I don't know what it is.
Okay, all right. I wanted to make sure.
That's not a tool.
Give me 1 second.
Cool. And thank you for everyone that is with us online. And for those of you who thought that I was, in some cases, speaking a bit loud, it's not always me. I have a nice Jabra speaker, and it really adds to my voice. Yeah. My wife would say that I'm actually a low speaker, so I'm happy that actually you heard me good. But anyway, I had a great time, being here with you, Jenna, and thank you, to Zappeltech and the audience. Everyone was online with us, and if you have any other questions, either now or offline, I'm happy to take them.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was wonderful having you here, and I really, really enjoyed your talk. So, let me get clarification on something.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Needed to get clarification on that. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay. So we are going to go ahead and flip over to our next speaker, who is Nikolaj. And just a little bit of background. He's got a ton of experience in mobile, and he's done Gherkin and web and C# and Java, and all sorts of great things. He's worked in multiple frameworks, and he says that he is lazy, so he automates everything. And I kind of appreciate that. Any way that we can make our lives a little bit easier is always better, right?
Yeah, that's my motto.
And Nikolaj, remind me, we've crossed paths before, right?
Yeah, I think it was like last year in December in a summit like organized by Zappeltech. Yeah,
that's what I thought. Okay, awesome. Well, it's so nice to have you back, and I can't wait to see your talk. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over. Sorry.
Okay, so regarding screen sharing, yeah, thank you, perfect. Okay, so hello everyone. Today in this talk, I will be covering Cucumber, test automation, and Salad. So Cucumber, I mean by the framework of test automation where you can write Gherkin syntax in order to write your test automation. So some test engineers, just like cats, have specific reaction to cucumbers, and they kind of dislike it because, well, it was promised that we could just copy paste your old manual test cases into automation, into Cucumber, and it would just magically work. But it didn't happen. And I get that there was like expectations and reality mismatching. And that's why there's such a big, I don't know, drawback from like the whole Cucumber thing. So regarding my disclaimer, so I'm not a fan of Cucumber. I don't get any like money. I don't get a compensation if you start using Cucumber. I'm just an engineer who's finding out the tools and like trying something new. And like my honest opinion is like it's just a framework. It have its benefit, it have its drawbacks. It's not perfect for all the situations, so you need to like be mindful when you're using that. But still, I do have a background in Gherkin. And I started with Calabash. There was like my era in experience for a Calabash, then for SpecFlow, and then lastly with the Protractor. So the Calabash one, it was used for mobile test automation. So we had a native application both in iOS and Android, and we used that Calabash to automate both of them. We actually connected them to the testing devices like the actual iPhone and Android, and had Mac Mini on the table where it was connected to, as a TeamCity job like agent, which will running all the jobs. And whenever you had whenever we had new build, it would be running, and you would get like feedback from actual device if the test cases are passing or not. But it didn't last long, and we needed to switch, like priority changed, and we needed to switch on our project. So then I went to the spec flow, and it was already running for multiple years, and we had a like test automation built in that. So I had an expectation, like a vision that the Cucumber, it's used that like that you have a step. Like I click on some kind of button and it's a variable. So basically use one step and you just change variables and it would be working. So underwater, you just like switch one or another locator. But in this one, it wasn't the case. There was a lot of different step definition for different situations. So there were like 20 ways you can click a button. And whenever you were writing a feature file, you would have to choose one of them, and you didn't even know if it would be working, because maybe something is specific to one page, which are like you're working a different one, it wouldn't work. So you end up writing a new one instead of like reusing something. So I didn't like that implementation, and I always thought it could be better. And when we got the new project, which was written in AngularJS, and we wanted to write automation for it from scratch, we used Protractor. And it was like 6 years ago, I think, when Protractor was actually still supported. So, and this is the fully realized Gherkin project that I think that we went. We went to the place where we really liked the implementation of Gherkin. It was actually helping us more than it was like obstructing or adding additional overhead. But to be honest, it was at the beginning, it was a BDD type, business analyst, project managers, all were using BDD, and designers as well, to describe the behavior, and we use that as a requirements, and then implementation happened, and we write the test automation at the end. But unfortunately, after a few months, everyone just decided, it's just too much, and we want to switch back to normal, simple requirements where everyone's used to. But with automation, we still decided to keep on going and continue building our framework in Cucumber and creating this Gherkin syntax just for automation, even though it might not be the best option, but we just wanted to continue with our framework. From the beginning, we had a main goal to make it maximize its reusability. We wanted to have fewer steps available, so we would know which one we need to use, and would know that step would be working as we expect. And we created, I think there was 2 functions how you can click a button. One of them just would be just a click a button, and it would work in any page. We just give them a variable. And another function for clicking buttons where something I think in a table, you could select specific row by specific name, and then that row had multiple buttons assigned to that, so you can interact with them. So only 2 ways you can interact with the buttons. And every time when you thought that I need to write a new step definition in order to make an action, you should ask, you would have to ask yourself, is it possible to do something with already existing ones, so you wouldn't have to create a new one. So we ended up with having quite clean approach. When you had to write feature files with scenarios, those steps were really easy to pick up, because you knew that there's only one way to click a button. So you knew how to what you need to write, what kind of variables you need to pass to it, and it would be working. Because we had only few step definition, our maintenance was kind of low. There wasn't a lot of code to be working with, and if you want to refactor how the buttons are being clicked, you just have one function to deal with. Well, 2 in our case, but still it's not that much. But on the downside, those implementation of these steps had to be really flexible. We needed to know, to support clicking with the same function, clicking hyperlinks, clicking buttons, tabs, menus, drop downs. All of them had to be supported with only one function. So it was quite flexible. So just as a statistics, so after 3 years working on that project, we had 12,500 test steps in our scenarios. This is excluding all the examples. And examples is where you have above the scenario, you have some kind of a table with the variables, and it would rerun the same scenario multiple times with different variables. So 12,500 is excluding all the examples, and only 53 step definitions. So it's on average, it was 237 times. So if you have a step definition, it would be probably used in 237 different places, different buttons, different drop-downs, different fields. So it was quite a good achievement, and we tried to keep that number, to that 53, to the minimum. Like, we didn't want to add anything else on top of that. Even that 53 number, it still like includes take screenshot, debugging, pauses, also some kind of specific legacy, like part of a system which we knew that we wouldn't change anytime soon, but we still needed the coverage for that in order to push it through to the production. So it's like 10 of those are still like used only once or twice, even maybe not even in runtime. So the actual median would be around 500. So if you take the middle ground, it's quite oftenly used. So we have step definition 500 times. It's used in our test cases. Just as a comparison to the previous SpecFlow implementation we had, it was only 3,500 steps in all the feature files and 175 step definitions. So it's like almost four times more steps for 4 times less of a scenarios, the steps in the scenario. So it's like 16 times more complex. It's harder to maintain. It's more step definitions to work. It's harder to refactor, and it's bigger data, like code base, to maintain. And on average, it was only 19 times used each scenario. So very reusable. So you might be wondering, how does this magical step definitions, which could support 237 like different cases, would look like? So we can deep dive into a few of those. One of them is simple, just click on the button. So you get the name for button you want to click. So for example, I click on login button, and then the type of a button. It could be button, checkbox, tab, card, row, hyperlink, whatever. And then you pass it as a variables. And then the click button function is like getting those variables and passing into it. So this actual step definition doesn't have no logic. It just extracts the variables and just pass it to another function. So we try to keep this layer to the minimum, like the bare bones of what we need in order to separate the gherkin and the code. So the code would be cleaner without any kind of like a gherkin text in it. Similar example with I should see some kind of field, a specific field. So in this case, we went and we take the field name and the matching type, like strict matching, starting with, containing, more than, and then the text we want to find in that field. So we take those variables and we then pass it to another function. Again, nothing much logical happening in this implementation for step definitions. For functions, it's kind of a similar, it's still not very overly complicated. In this case, we get the button name. So it might be login button, and we pass this as a variable to the element parser. An element parser is some kind of a database. You get the query for what kind of text of a button you want to get, and it always returns you the element, the locator you can start working with. So that button is now something that you can click, you can view, you can use any kind of functions available as an element, and you can basically just click it. And also, if a start is failing, we want to have some kind of informative error message. Another example, a little bit more complex. So I should see something in the dropdown. And again, we're using element parser, and we give it to the dropdown name, and it gives us the dropdown. So we can check the all options, which contains the value we're seeking in that dropdown, and we get the count of that. If a count is expected, then it's fine. If not, again, we are writing quite informative error messages. So in this case, I expected to see 7 of toilet paper, but found 0, something that we can relate in pandemic, right? So it would be more informative. And we wanted to push for this information because every time when you go for a failed test case report, every time when you need to go inside the code, debug, run it, check out the latest version, because you get only I expected to see true, but I received false. It's not informative enough. So we had an unwritten rule. So every time when you see this kind of feedback in your test report, you had to go and add normal message in order for you never to go back into the code and read and find what's. So you need to pinpoint what exactly is not working, so you don't have to do that debugging. And over 3 years of investment, that was really great return on investment, because we didn't spend a lot of time writing this, but it helped us along the way each day when we had to maybe look at the flaky test, maybe look at the actual failures to make sure that what's not working. So let's get back to this magical database of element parser. How does it work? So we use some sort of vocabulary. So we have a text which is mapped to the specific location you need to return if you search for that text. And we were using switch. So why switch specifically? So it had pretty great readability. So you have these cases, they're all aligned. They're aligned, all this text, and easy to find, easy to read, find the locators you want to have. And additionally, it also had a search for duplicates. If you had a duplicate case, it would be marked for you you already have this this element in this database. So you need to either rename it or reuse the previous one. Also, we could have used else if, and every time if the room name drop-down name is a room name, then do something. So we could use that, but that ifs are really there could be a lot of human error. If you add something additionally, if the room name is drop-down name is room name and the environment is QA, then do that. Because of that complexity, you can have some kind of human error, because those files, those vocabularies at the end of our project, it was really huge, 1,000 lines of actual locators for you to use. So you want to reduce the complexity, because we knew that those files are going to be huge. Also, if you wanted to add something else, how it works is just basically you sanitize the string, you want to lowercase them, then you go through the list, each of the case, oh, I found the room inventory, this is what I was searching for, and you return the locator. And it's still using page object model, resolve everything an orders page, and you just return specific element to it. But there's a mapping for vocabulary, which text is mapped to which locator. And it's really allows you to move away from all the gherkin inside the code itself in the code base. So you basically have feature files, maybe something in step definitions, and only in vocabulary is just a gherkin. Everywhere else is just the plain code, just like a normal, any kind of other programming language. So we also used quite extensive error messages. If we didn't find something, we're saying that this drop-down name is not yet defined. Also, if after sanitization, we did some trimming, maybe lowercasing, and if the value is changing from what we received, we're also saying that after sanitization, this is a new value, maybe something mismatching with what you're searching or what you have in the vocabulary. So what we end up with is a database which can be used by multiple functions. So for example, if I have a field username, if I add that field to the vocabulary, because all the functions, all the steps are using the same vocabularies, it will be available in all instances. I can immediately, if I add that to vocabulary, from a test case, from a gherkin, I can assert it. If it's visible, get the value of it, enter text to that, it would be working from beginning. So there's not much need to go and add something in the code. Additional improvements we made were page detection. So we ended up having a lot of specific cases. For example, the status was repeating in multiple pages. We had one for user status, one for item order status, event, a lot of them. So in order to keep the text to the minimum, we added functionality another built-in nested switch inside of it. And based on the page you're currently on in your automation, it will return one or another element. And it was kind of saved us a lot of time from debugging. Also, it was from code perspective, it was quite minimalistic disruption. And from test case perspective, if we would add instead of status user status, all of those cases would be bigger lines of that readable text, and sometimes a bit too much to read. So if you can keep them to the minimum, it would be more readable as documentation or scenarios if someone else is reading them. Another improvement we made were with injected locators. now I'm thinking that maybe like injections are a bit controversial topic, so probably I should have changed this picture. Sorry. Anyway, so injecting locators is a method when you can tag something in DOM so you can use it and find it easily with test automation. So for example, you can add data attribute like data minus end to end, and then some kind of like a text which you would use to find that element. So in order to avoid using chained elements like parent of some parent of other element. So in order to avoid that, you can just tag elements in DOM, and then when that version is deployed to some kind of environment, you can start using that instead of like finding out the best way to chain elements in order to get the specific element you want. But we use it a little bit differently. So for example, if you have a view page and you have an edit page, like username is the same kind of like, from functional perspective, it could be the same field, but in one case it would be a list, like li item, or in another one input. But if I would tag them with that specific locator, same way, I could use that from page object model and also from my Gherkin vocabulary. I can use them as it's the same element, because functionally it is the same element. It's still a name I want to assert, maybe enter, and in the case I can tag them in both way, similarly, and I would just save some time, some space, and lines of code, and I can interact with them. Doesn't matter if it's a view or edit page. Maybe if it's a view and I would try to enter text to it, it wouldn't work. But that would probably happen only when I'm developing test cases. It wouldn't happen when I actually have running a regression testing. So it actually saved a lot of time, and was really convenient for us to tag similar elements and just group them together and just use them as a one. So quite an interesting approach. Another thing that we did was use placeholder for all ordinal numbers. So as an example, we ended up using a lot of test data. So it was like first test event. We knew that in the first one you had some kind of like it's canceled. In a second event it was empty, and the third one had some items in it. So in order to support them with our vocabulary, we needed to add each case for each of them. But what we could have what we come up with is that sanitizing string was removing all these ordinal numbers like first, second, third, whatever. It was just placing a placeholder instead of them. So if I have a first event overview, like I need to navigate to a first event overview page or second or third, I would still get to this specific line, to this specific case. And what it would do instead, it would just extract that index of that what I want to find. First is 0, second is 1, third is 2, and so on. So I extract that, and then I pass it to that specific function. And that function just basically appends specific ID to URL so we can navigate to that specific event page. And it was quite a clear and clean implementation. If you have a new event you want to use for testing, you basically just add a new object here, like in this array, like number 9, and ID, some kind of a new ID of the event you want to use, and that would be available for you from the feature file. If you can start immediately writing, I want to navigate to the 3rd or 9th event page. So it was quite clean and interesting, but we also use this for interacting with specific rows in some kind of a table. So we could use the first, second, third row, or last row. Last was also supported, and it would just work the same way. We just sanitize, remove which row we want to interact with, and just pass it to a function, and we just come up with an answer which index you want to actually interact with. We also had to solve a small problem with first name, last name, third-party vendor. It wasn't supposed to be extracted as what index of them we want to interact with. So those had to be added to exclusions, exceptions, so they wouldn't be extracted from that. So, but it still worked. We needed to find out the solution to do that. And the last improvement we made were the page and component objects. So we made kind of a hybrid of that. If you would follow page object step by step, you would have to, for each of the page, like web page, you had to create a page object. But we found out that there's some elements like navigation bar is, well, repeating through each of the page. So should they have, should they be in each of the page? Like menu bars, maybe some kind of forms, modules? Probably not. So we extracted them to the components. It was still called component object, and it had some like save buttons, cancel buttons, and were used for just a few elements like navigation bar, modules, warnings, and forms. So, but it actually saved us a lot of time because those have been changing in the past. So we had to only change it in one place instead of using it in and going to each of the page where they had some kind of interaction with navigation bar. So instead of that, you can only change it in one place and it will be working. So just as a summary, there might be an expectation that if you're using Gherkin and you're using non-Gherkin automation, the non-Gherkin one would be kind of a linear, like over time the complexity will grow, but it will be just as you expect. With Gherkin, it will be just always an overhead. It would be the same way if you were just writing test automation with non-Gherkin, but the extra layer of supporting feature files would be always an overhead. Sometimes it's even worse when you just start running into like bottlenecks of feature file, because if you have step definition and it's already used and you want to create a new one, you might be blocked because, well, it's already used and you want a new one. You want a new way to click a button. You will need to, I don't know, to come up with something more creative in order to add another step definition. So they would be like existing in the same namespace with different names. And what we ended up with, I think it's at some point we just stopped growing complexity. So if we would need to add like twice more test cases, up to 25,000 test cases, like test steps, I don't think the complexity would grow a lot. We already have a lot of steps defined. The only thing that would grow is like feature files. Well, it's expected because more test cases would mean more feature files created or more scenarios created. Also, vocabularies would grow because you would need to interact with different elements, and new page objects would be created for new pages you want to like increase the coverage on. But the code itself wouldn't grow. It would just stop. The complexity would just stop at some place, and we could expand, create more and more. It would be, the volume would increase, but the complexity would stay the same because we only had a little of the coding part. But the other parts, like the module approach to the vocabularies, allows us to scale much higher with more efficient and more linear, compared to like if we would be using it in like would create more step definition for each occasion. So I think it was quite an interesting challenge, and how we actually managed to solve that as a team. And just a quick summary, what we went through today. So maximizing reusability. This is true for both Gherkin and non-Gherkin implementation. If you can reuse some kind of helpers, functions, which you already have in your framework, do so. Try to minimize how much you create for each of the occasion, because you will have to maintain them later on. So try to reuse, make it more flexible to fit both cases which you want to cover, and that would leave you with less maintenance in the long run. Informative error messages is a good in the return on investment. If you invest that early on, you might save yourself a long time, because if you're gonna check the report from automation each day, and like we had a really long period where we had flake tests, but after some time we fixed them. It was quite stable until new Chrome version released, and then it started becoming flaky again. So, and after a while, Protractor wasn't even supported. So, yeah, this happened as well. But at the beginning, it was really informative. Like it was easier for anyone checking those reports from what failed, what went wrong. It was much easier for them to understand what's not working. And vocabularies are something probably can use only in non-Gherkin implementation, but you can try it in Gherkin implementation, but you can try to use it in non-Gherkin one. I would be surprised if you could, but maybe. But it's easier way to map text from Gherkin to locator you want to return for that one, and just centralize it into one place. All the fields are being being parsed by one entity, and just you could give them a name and they give you back the locator, and all the functions are using a same way to get that locators. It's really is saving a lot of time. Then some workarounds is that page detection might help you minimizing the variables, like how much of the text you need to use in order to specifically match specific text to the locator. And then injecting locators is helpful not only for Gherkin but non-Gherkin as well, because you can easily save yourself a lot of time, because UI might be changing, and if you connect it to div or specific classes which are used for display properties for those elements, it might change. But if you add something concrete to that, it will help you in long run without a lot of needing a lot of maintenance if UI changes. And ordinal numbers is something you might use it in your implementation as well. There might be occasions where you're using ordinal numbers. And page component is that you don't have to follow blindly page object model, because sometimes it does create duplicates. But if you can do some kind of a hybrid for page and component objects, and that could save you some time as well. And that's it. Thank you for listening, and I hope this presentation did not encourage you to use Cucumber, because Cucumber is a great framework, but it's best used in a situation when you using BDD in the old project, and everyone starting from project managers and business analysts and designers using that language, and you can reuse that in your automation. That's fine. If you need a living documentation and clients or stakeholders are reading from them and they need that as a proof, that's also a great source to do that. But anything else, it might be not the best place to use that. So be mindful when you use it. But what I hope this presentation actually did is inspired you to maybe seek out other ways to do automation, to do problem solving. If you see a problem, if you see a solution and you don't agree with that, you think that maybe there is another way, try it. At least do a POC, try it, and maybe you will come up with a new solution which you can share with everyone else. So I think it's, I hope it inspired you to maybe seek out and do something that might not be according to Stack Overflow, or some guide on the internet. So maybe any questions?
That was great. Thank you so much. So it's interesting, Cucumber, right? There's some really great things there. And as somebody who, well, I still consider myself a tester, I'm technically a product owner now. I appreciate Gherkin a lot. But yeah, there's some stuff with Cucumber that isn't perfect. So I want to flip over and get to some questions, and then we can chat some more. So we have a question that came in. He said, great session. Can you please elaborate on injecting locators in tests? How can we add locators to the DOM while writing tests?
Yeah, well, you need to use the actual application you're developing. So you need to have that repository checked out, and you need to add those locators to the repository. Maybe how we did, if we have a new page, we want to inject locators so we can easily find them when doing automation. So we agreed with developers how we're going to do that. They said that we can use a class variable, attribute, but our locators have to start with end-to-end minus, and then any name we want to choose for that locator. But we didn't want to do attribute of data minus end-to-end. I'm not sure why, but this was the agreement. And every time when we change and add locators to the DOM, we find it in the code where that page is, then we find HTML or whatever format you're using, find that element and add the additional attribute or additional class. and then create a pull request and ask some front-end engineers or any developer just to code review our changes, and then they were merged into the repository of the application. And the next time it's deployed, or if you testing locally, you can just check out the latest version, build it, and run it, and it will be there all the time from now on. So yeah, that's. I hope it answered how actually to do that.
I think so. Makes sense. We have another question that came in. Let's see. Daniel would like to know if you could elaborate more on the idea of scenario and Cucumber testing.
In Cucumber, there's feature files, and there are like features, which you basically like just to compare it with something like we have in in Jest or Mocha, I think. They're like describe, and there is it statements. So describe is a feature. You can describe what you want to, like what this feature file is testing, and the scenario is it statement. So like scenario could be, it should block if a user he enters incorrect password 3 times in a row. So that's a scenario you were like kind of testing. So it's basically just a syntax how you can write this, like test cases for Cucumber.
Makes sense. Let's see. Where can Daniel go to look for more information if he wants to get a little bit deeper in that?
I think the Cucumber IO maybe, or Cucumber, just the Google Cucumber automation framework, not just any Cucumber. So any Cucumber automation framework would give you some kind of a detailed explanation, maybe even guide how to start up the automation. How we used, we had the protractor, so the runner, the executor was a protractor, but we added a plugin to support Gherkin, and it was like Cucumber for protractor, something like that. But it's not supported anymore. Like protractor is like a dead tool for a few years now. So like I'm not recommending to use that. But I think a lot of modern tools have like a plugins to support Cucumber, and probably just in Cucumber IO page you would find quite a big extensive list of tools and guides.
Okay, awesome. Wasn't sure if there was like a source that you preferred over others, because there's a lot of information out there, and a lot of it is bad. So it always helps to get referred to something.
Yeah, I haven't been using that tool for I think 3 years now. So I'm like nowadays I'm using more like just the situation happens that in projects there's no one is like in projects I'm in, no one is using BDD, or no one is requiring any live documentation, living documentation. So there's just no point in using Cucumber. So I'm a bit outdated on that topic. What's the latest?
Makes sense. So I'm curious, what are you working on now? Like, is there something you're really interested in, something you're experimenting with?
Yeah, good question. So right now, we did work on test automation project. I helped build in the initial framework where we were using any unit and WebDriver to control it, and it was like a plain one without any additional fancy functions. So it was a bit hard to go from Puppeteer and Cypress and the Playwright and go into plain WebDriver without any helping functions. But it was something that the client we were working on asked us to do, so they could support it. And yeah, it was really boy, it was hard to find for page to load, for elements to be visible, and you needed to create that logic, all the helper functions from a bottom, from scratch. And in order to get to that perfect level of stability, it took a while. So yeah, that was an interesting challenge from which you always think there's new, more modern frameworks you can use and avoid this kind of hassle. It's just sad that you need to scratch, but it's an experience as well, because you know how it's actually working, and I think it's still building like adding to your suitcase for like what you can do.
So Daniel's got a follow-up question, because he is now learning about BDD, which of course goes hand in hand with Cucumber. So he wants to know a little bit more about BDD, and of course, like, you know, Daniel, just so you know, there's only so many hours in the day, so I think Nikolaj can give you some background on BDD, but BDD is a huge topic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I can probably talk about the specific implementation we had and the idea behind it. So we had a table of the steps or like actions you can perform, and some variables we're supporting, and we asked everyone to be aligned on the way we write those BDD scenarios, and help, and by using that we had easier time to just import them into our automation. And we needed still to add some steps in between. Sometimes it's like if you want to click to some kind of as a user, you just click on that menu. As a like automation perspective, you need to expand the kebab menu first, click on it, and then you have the menu items. So yeah, there were some actions like needed to add, but it was easier for us not to change a lot of text. So we aligned with how we write, and we had to share a lot of feedback from developers, to sharing to like business analysts how they read this like behaviors. But I know that the designers really loved using that. It was easy for them to use that language to explain behavior of the animation or how it should be behaved. So instead of like writing or recording some kind of a sophisticated like a GIF or like a mock-up for how its animation should be behaving, they could just write the like using Gherkin syntax with like transparencies. In 1 second it becomes transparent, like 50% transparent. In 0.2 seconds it just totally transparent, and so on. So it is really useful for them how to explain with stats, with like easy to recreate steps, and then developers could easily implement that. So yeah, this is what we were using. One of the examples we also like encouraged to use BDD more is we investigated how the unit tests are being written, and as usual, the unit tests were written in a matter like you know how the code is working, and you basically go to look at the code and you write unit tests to verify the code is working. And you sometimes forget to verify what it actually does, like what the user is getting from it. And we encourage them to use more about like to use behavior driven development in the unit test itself. So like writing scenario names more like what's the behavior I'm actually testing, instead of like a method name or function name and just like test that like function. So it was more useful and uncovered more of the problems we had when like implementation wasn't aligned with with the requirements. And by doing unit testing on the implementation and looking only on the implementation, you wouldn't notice that. So yeah, it added some value in there, but it was like really small proof of concept, like how to use that. So, but yeah, it's related to them.
And there's a couple of things you touched on that, if it's okay, I kind of want to expand on.
Sure.
Because I feel like the way we talk about BDD is a little bit limiting to the power of what BDD really is, because it's not just a means of kind of communicating. It's a whole culture. So when we're doing BDD as a team, because this is something that the entire development team needs to do. Testers need to be on board with it. Developers have to be on board with it. The product owners or business analysts need to be using it. The designers need to be using it. We shift from talking about what an application does to talking about what the user values, and designing and building and delivering code based on what they value. And then we start building out all of our tests, including our unit tests and our automated tests and our manual tests, based on what the user really values. There's a huge amount of power in BDD that I think gets glanced over and missed. And I think it gets missed because everybody associates it so strongly with Cucumber instead of seeing it as its own distinct, not an action, but culture. And so when you take something like test-driven development and you write really meaningful unit tests based on what you understand about the code you're going to write, and then you add in building tests based on what you understand about what the customer values, now you've shifted from a code delivery culture to a customer value culture. And I could talk about this for hours, which is why I'm going to stop myself. But I think that we make it too small when it can be this really big, powerful thing. But I'm going to stop myself because we could wind up here for 3 hours talking about this.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. Like, I do notice that sometimes we are switching to like implementation details too much without thinking like, what's the value behind that? Like, do we need to do that? And it's just sometimes it's it's a bit disappointing that the like priorities are not being like assigned by the value, more about what like different things in like impact our priorities rather than the value and like what user would get from that. So yeah, I totally agree with that. And like I never been in the project where like like BDD was so much in like a part of the like not a part of a culture, but like the idea behind everything, starting from requirements and starting from user stories. So but it sounds really interesting. I wish I could try it out. It sounds really powerful, as you said. Yeah.
I think it's a perfect world kind of thing, right? Like it's a once in a lifetime opportunity that you're going to get to like work in that kind of culture. But I want to shift. Oh, sorry. I want to shift because Anna has a question. What are the advantages of Cucumber? She said, it seems cool, but what are the advantages kind of in a nutshell?
Yeah, so mostly like advertised for is that the living documentation is that if you read the test case, like the scenarios, the steps, and it's passing, that means that this is actually what's working. And if it's working, that means that you can, I don't know, try to use that as a functionality. Maybe it's still like, if you would be only the code, that means only developers or test engineers, anyone who's like the technical knowledge to read the code could read the scenarios of actually what's happening, how the functions are working. If you have a BDD in place, like in Gherkin, it's test feature files written in Gherkin, that means that anyone can read them. If they're like written in a human readable manner, like if you don't use class names inside the feature files to target the elements, but you're using actual readable like login button instead of like ptn minus login minus something, just very specific class name to target, that would be more readable. And even from business perspective, or even from UAT perspective, I could read out the latest feature files developed, and I would know what I will get in this release, and I know how to use them, how to invoke them. So that's one of the biggest advantages, well, in my opinion. Another one would be if the framework is how. In our example, like the framework was quite easy to maintain. So basically, if you want to write new test cases, you don't need to do a lot of coding. What you need to do is ability to write feature files, to know how to add new elements inside the vocabulary. So it's basically a new case with some kind of like link to the element inside the page object model, and also add a new element inside the page object model. So basically a name and some kind of locator. So there is not much of the complexity, and like the learning curve is quite small in order for you to, if the framework is already built out. So learning curve is quite small to start using the Gherkin, compared if it's all written in code and it might be not very maintainable and like hard to read. Not always, but sometimes it is. So yeah, I think those might be the two values. Maybe probably there's more. Forget about them.
Somebody commented something that's really true, which is that one of the big values we get out of Gherkin and Cucumber is that it's in plain text. That so much of this is really readable and understandable, which enables your manual testers and your business folks to get more engaged, which in turn lightens your load because they're doing some of this too, which is super helpful.
Like one of the things that I had troubles with is then you get on a project which is already like running, and you have a manual test case, just in simple steps, and you start performing it, and you notice that it wasn't maintained and doesn't work, and you don't know how to actually that feature is working. You don't know how to actually make sure that it's still functioning. And with that living documentation, if the tests are failing, that means you need to maintain those scenarios. That means that it's like outdated. So if it's always green, if it's always working, those are more up to date, not deprecated and still maintained scenarios. So it's a really big value if you like value those kind of things in your project.
I agree. Awesome. Thank you. Well, any final thoughts before we send people back to their day?
That's final thoughts from me, right? Not
yes.
from...
Yes, final thoughts from you.
I think like there was a point in my career that when I was using Cucumber, and there was like a really big like I wouldn't like really big negative feedback about it, and I at some point I was kind of not curious, but kind of ashamed that I was like writing in Gherkin. And I think that was like a small portion of my career, but like there was a year or so when I was like what automation using? Just like no automation, just like So, but I hope like right now, if you're using that and if you're using it properly and it's benefit you, like I hope it will like you won't be like ashamed that you're using that, because I think it's a great tool, and it's like I think you need to celebrate that what it achieved, because I think it accelerated the whole adoption of test automation, because at some point everyone thought like it's so easy to start automating, and I think a lot of people jumped on board, started their automation, but thought like maybe there's better ways to do that, and just steer towards more like code only automation. And I think it really did a great impact to automation and to testing, and I want to celebrate that.
I agree. It really was a more meaningful entryway into automation than Selenium capture and playback, than some of the really early like spreadsheet kind of driven tools. Like, what is it? Data driven and keyword driven. Like when we got to Gherkin, we grew up a little bit as far as like automation that doesn't require a CS degree.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. That talk was wonderful. I really enjoyed our chat. I'm glad we were able to get everybody's questions answered. And thank you so much for joining us today. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day, whether it's the afternoon or the morning for you. But I hope the rest of the day is great for everybody. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody. So I hope everybody will join us on our next meetup. I believe it is on March 9th. Unfortunately, I won't be here with you because I have a conflict, but I know that the speakers and the host will be awesome, and we can't wait to see you on March 9th.